The N-scale Columbia and Western Model Railroad was built primarily for operations. Let's tour the line across the Boundary Subdivision with the Boundary Sub Wayfreight West number 81. But first a bit about the prototype. The Canadian Pacific Southern route across British Columbia stretched from the Alberta border to Hope and the main line to Vancouver. The Boundary Subdivision existed between the subdivision points of Nelson and Midway and was given its name due to its proximity to the American border. The Boundary Subdivision followed the Kootenay River west until it met the Columbia River at Castlegar. From there it climbed along the southern side of the Lower Arrow Lake and then up Bulldog Creek to Farron Summit. It fell down McCrae Creek to Christina Lake and then along the Kettle River to Grand Forks. While the prototype had to climb a second summit before finally reaching its destination at Midway, the visible most western portion of the Columbian Western is at Cascade, which is the foot of the western climb to Farron Summit. Let's meet up with the crew of 81 in Nelson Yard early one November morning in 1970 as they begin their westward journey. On the Columbian Western, Nelson Yard occupies the western side of the second level, 42 inches above the height of the floor. This second level also includes the South Slocan branch in the middle and Castlegar and the pulp mill at Craft. The crew will pick up their locomotives, here represented by the yellow arrow, at the east end of the Nelson Diesel House and will take them to track number 3 where their train awaits. Our lead unit today is 8715, which is a Canadian Locomotives Company H1644. The second unit is a Montreal-built FB2, and the final 2 units are F7s, an F7B and an FP7, both of these products of GMD in London, Ontario. After pumping air, we get our clearances so we're ready to depart. We check the schedule. We're a numbered train, and all westbounds out of Nelson are numbered, whereas eastbounds into Nelson are run as extras. We haven't received a train order to make us aware that we have a meet with an extra along the way, but we'll keep our eyes open as we pass train order stations to see whether there are orders for us. We sign the register, and we're on our way. As our train departs on the yard lead, let's have a look at the trackage at the west end of Nelson Yard. There's a lot of tracks here, and it keeps the west end switcher busy. Furthest to the left are the 2 cleanout tracks. Next to those are the tracks to the old turntable pit and roundhouse. The roundhouse is now used as a car shop. The diesel house is in the middle, and then the arrival departure tracks. South Yard is furthest to the right. It's here that there's the track to the freight house, as well as a couple of industry spots for the oil and gas industry. Our train will follow the south side of Kootenay River, then cross at Tagum, and our first stop will be at the junction point of South Slocan. Yep, that's an osprey nest on the corner of the truss bridge. Train 81 is now entering South Slocan, which is a junction with the Slocan subdivision. Here, the Slocan subdivision veers north to Slocan City and the large Triangle Forest Products Mill, as well as connections through a rail barge service to Rosebery and the Cusp on the Castle branch. We do have a bit of work here. We have a boxcar that's bound for the team track, which is to the right. However, that track is a facing point spur for us, so we're going to leave it on the double-ended siding. If we leave it on that siding, it can be worked as a trailing point move, either by our eastbound counterpart, or by the Craft Switcher or the Slocan Wayfreight, both of whom also come through South Slocan. We'll couple back up to our train and then return to our journey west. It's a short hop across the Slocan River Bridge to the junction town of Castlegar. While the Boundary subdivision will continue west, the Roslyn subdivision begins here and then ventures south to Trail, which is close to the U.S. border. It's here that Cominco has a massive ore smelter at Tadnak, as well as fertilizer plants up the Roslyn subdivision at Warfield. On the modeled Columbian Western, all of this operation to and from the Roslyn subdivision is just simulated with staging. We do, however, run two hotshot freights from Cranbrook all the way through to Tadnak, one eastbound and one westbound, each session. These freights change power, crews, and cabooses at Nelson, so there is operations, as well as picking up and dropping off sulfur tank cars in the Castlegar yard. Train 81 does have work here. There are 5 empty wood chip hoppers in the yard that we need to pick up and take further west. They'll eventually make their way to the sawmills around Grand Forks and Midway. The loaded chip hoppers will be returned, by the eastbound Wayfreight and dropped in the yard. The wood chips are bound for the Castlegar craft mill, which is just outside of Castlegar. All of the work in and around Castlegar, which includes the freight house, a few small industries, the massive Castlegar pulp mill, and the sawmill, are the work of the craft switcher to perform each day. The craft switcher is one of the most challenging jobs on the Columbian Western. It leaves Nelson Yard first thing in the morning, makes its way to Castlegar with about 25 to 30 cars, switches all those cars out and returns at the end of the session. Meanwhile, because Castlegar Junction is so busy, it will have to dodge a number of mainline freights and hand off traffic to and from these freights. The switcher's nowhere to be seen right now, so it must be at the Castlegar mill doing its switching. Having picked up the 5 wood chip hoppers, we're ready to return to our journey. Castlegar is a register station, so we have to make sure to register our time in and out so other trains know that we passed this way. The Boundary main line will duck behind the Castlegar mill, which we see in front of us. The mill is one of the major shippers for the Columbian Western. Not only does it take wood chips in from the mills to the west, but logs are also delivered via the water and then chipped up. Sulfuric acid from Tadanac is delivered here as well as other chemicals, and then bales of pulp are shipped to the east to Cranbrook, which will eventually be made into rayon. The stiff 2.2% westbound grade begins right behind the pulp mill. Sometimes pushers are required, and if that's the case, the pushers are dispatched from their station at Farron Summit and will push from Castlegar all the way to Farron. Our engines are just ducking into the helix. That light you see is part of the infrared detection circuit that keeps track of the trains when they're in the helix. Departing Castlegar, we make our way west along the lower Arrow Lake. 2 turns of the helix, and we emerge at Shields on the second level. The next stop on our journey is the small siding of Shields. We slowly emerge from tunnel number 1 and onto the dramatic cliffs and retaining walls above lower Arrow Lake at Shields siding. The photographer had to climb high up into the trees along the mountainside in order to get this dramatic shot. We have one pickup here. A gondola has been set out on the maintenance away track, and this has to be moved to a similar track at Farron Summit. With our pickup accomplished, we continue our westbound trek. The next siding is at Corkendall. However, before we reach there, we'll have to cross three dramatic bridges: McCormick Creek Bridge, Far Creek Bridge, and Bar Creek Bridge. We're approaching the most interesting bridge on the line, which is the bridge over Far Creek. It's a pin-connected truss bridge, with the pins and trusses having been moved from two truss bridges which were originally over the Bow River in Calgary. They're moved to the Kootenays, reassembled, and new steelwork was added around 1914. The final big bridge on this side of Farron Hill is the Bar Creek Bridge, which in many ways is identical to the McCormick Creek Bridge we crossed a few minutes ago. Emerging from tunnel number 3, we immediately encounter Corkendall siding. Well, it looks like there's a train here meeting us. It's an eastbound ore extra, taking ore from the fields around Phoenix, British Columbia, to the east to the smelter at Tadnak. We don't normally encounter this train because normally it's at Tadnak before we even depart from Nelson. However, it must have been delayed for some reason. Perhaps there was a problem with the pushers. We expect we'll meet the pushers up at Farron. We're a scheduled train, so we have the superiority. The eastbound extra has made its way into Corkendall siding safely before we've arrived. Corkendall is a very long siding, and often we will meet our eastbound counterpart here if they're early and have already made their way through Farron Summit. Our eastbound counterpart runs as an extra, so it's up to them to decide when and how they may meet scheduled trains. It looks like we have a board down here, so we have to stop and get orders. Corkendall is one of 5 active train order stations on the boundary. We'll pull our train to a stop in front of the train order station, and both the conductor and engineer will enter the station and sign for the orders and get a clearance, so eventually we can continue our westbound journey. After Corkendall, our next westbound stop will be at Farron Summit. It's just after Corkendall that the rails will veer away from the Lower Arrow Lakes and begin to climb up narrow Pup Creek Valley. Pup Creek Valley is carved into a north-facing slope, so it doesn't see very much light, and as a result, it's very green and the rocks are moss-covered in this area. We received 2 orders at Corkendall. The first was for us to take the siding at Farron. The dispatcher knows we have some work at Farron, so it's easier for us to perform that work from the siding, and there to meet our eastbound counterpart, the eastbound Wayfreight. Also, we're to take the siding at Cascade as well, for a meet with an unscheduled passenger train. According to the timetable, we're the only scheduled train on the boundary at this time, therefore we have rights to all the mainline trackage. If the dispatcher wishes for us to meet another train, or for us to take the passing siding, he needs to issue an order restricting our rights as given by that timetable, and that's what he's done. We're just about to duck into the 1 kilometer long Bulldog Tunnel through Bulldog Mountain. And as we exit on the western side, we'll come out onto Porcupine Creek Fill. The rails have climbed to over 3,000 feet, and it's this area that often sees snow from the fall all the way through the spring. We pull slowly up to the siding switch, and the head-end brakeman gets out and throws the switch so we can take the siding at Farron. As we pull slowly into Farron, we can see the pusher set parked on the Y. The pushers are stationed here and are dispatched as required to the east or west foot of the slopes to help trains all the way to the summit. We have a bit of work here at Farron, so we'll perform it before meeting our eastbound counterpart. We have 2 empty log bunks that need to be loaded. However, the log track is a facing point track, so we'll drop the cars on the double-ended house track. Our eastbound counterpart will work these as a trailing point move. We'll do the same for them on our return tomorrow, working any trailing point cars that they will have left. We also have to drop that gon that we picked up at Shields on the maintenance away track. However, that's a trailing point move, so it's easy for us to perform. With our switching work finished, we'll pull up to the clearance point of Farron siding. We'll do our brake test here and wait for our eastbound counterpart to appear. Immediately after Farron, the track begins to fall at a very steep 2.2% grade down McRae Canyon. There's the eastbound extra, emerging from the short Paulson Tunnel. It's now going to enter the snow shed and make its way towards us at Farron. The white flags on 4104 identify it as an extra. It's our eastbound counterpart. It left Grand Forks, heading eastbound, working the mill and then the industries along the line about the same time that we left Nelson this morning. It'll be us tomorrow. We'll return as extra 8715 eastbound. With 4104 in the clear, we realign the switch and begin our descent down McCrae Canyon. Exiting Short Paulson Tunnel, we can see Coryell Tank in the distance. We're running now high above McCrae Creek and into the Christina Lake watershed. Our tracks are clinging to the side of the steep hill as we pass through Lafferty and into Fife. The cameraman is standing on top of shed number 2 watching 81 approach. Clinging to the side of the hill, our tracks cross a number of active slide paths. One of them is bridged by this through truss bridge. We're now pulling into Fife. We pass many of those distinctive enclosed water tanks. Stoves inside them helped assure that the water for the steam engines never froze during the cold winter months. That boxcar on the siding to our right is for us to work tomorrow as a trailing point move. It's an empty to be loaded with cut lumber for the Sadner Brother Mills lumber reload just to the west of Fife. On our left is a quarry where we'll often pick up side dump cars of riprap for use by the maintenance away crews along the line. And just coming into the view also on our left is the Kaminko limestone tipple. Here, hopper cars are loaded with limestone and taken to trail where that limestone is used for flux in the smelting process. But today we only have a single move at Fife. We have to do one trailing point drop of a boxcar onto the siding, so that tomorrow both of those boxcars can be shifted to the Sadner Brothers lumber reload. After coupling up and pumping air, we're on our way west again. The Santa Rosa Road crossing over the Columbia and Western makes a very good vantage point for us to watch the Westbound as it heads out of Fife. Those two boxcars are loads at the Sadner Brothers reload that we're going to pick up tomorrow on our way back east. The next stop out of Fife is Cascade, but before we get there, we have to make our way along the arid benchlands and across the Kettle River. Train 81 is now venturing out onto the eastern fill approach to the soaring Kettle River Bridge. It is the fifth and largest of the crossings that the Canadian Pacific makes of the Kettle River. Under the fill is a wooden trestle, which was covered in rock when the original wooden bridge that stood here was replaced by the steel structure that you see early in the 19th century. The model is scaled full size for N scale, and when the fills are included, is over 6 feet long. The bridge gives us an excellent vantage point to see the full length of our train. At this point it's 4 locomotives and 20 cars, which is approaching what the prototype would have been like in 1970. The 4 units are needed not only for the steep grades, but also because you're pretty much guaranteed to lose 1 locomotive on the way out and 1 locomotive on the way back. The train is made up mostly of empty boxcars and wood chip gonds for loading at the different mills, as well as hoppers for ore picked up along the way, and occasionally a tank car of fuel oil for delivery. Cascade is the westernmost modeled portion of the Columbian Western, and I've taken liberty with the track arrangement. While it does include the ore reload that was here, I've moved a potato warehouse and an interchange with the Burlington Northern from the west. Train 81 always has a lot of work at the industries, and today is no exception. However, due to the length of the video, we're going to meet the passenger train that's waiting for us here and call it a day. After the rail diesel car has departed, we finish all our switching. We then head west into staging, which represents Grand Forks. One turn down the helix, and 81 is in the clear and staging. That terminates our run today, and I hope it's given you a good opportunity to see what it's like to run a Wayfreight across the Columbian Western.